two, whoo!
Welcome to Authenticity Lab, a podcast where we celebrate connecting with our authentic selves. I'm Dr. Kelsey Miles, a musician, songwriter, and also a chemistry professor. Each week, I share a new story and break it down using none other than the scientific method. My hope is that this podcast will invite you to live more boldly, lead with curiosity, and truly lean into what makes you who you are. Are you ready? Great. Let's dive into today's episode. We are talking about trusting ourselves. I'm going to share a story about how I did not expect myself to make a certain decision, and it turned out to be the best thing I could have done. And the whole reason that it was the best thing I could have done was because it came from an internal place of inspiration. I felt a calling, a little bit of a spark inside of me that knew that this decision I was going to make, for whatever reason, was the right one, even though logically it didn't seem right to me. I felt like I needed to make it. So let me tell you about a time I was moving from Madison, Wisconsin to Kansas City. So this was in 2023, and I had been planning the move for a little bit. I had met this corporate band in Kansas City. They're called Lost Wax, and I met them while I was traveling, and they started to hire me. And during 2022, I had been coming down to Kansas City, or they were flying me into different cities to play with them at high-end weddings and corporate events. It was really, really fun. And I started to meet a whole new group of people in the music world. And I knew that for my music, I wanted to move to a bigger city. As a harmonica player, I really wanted to dive into a city that had a big blues foundation. And that's what Kansas City has. It's a lot of jazz and a lot of blues. So when I made the decision to move, it was for music. And before I moved, I planned this farewell tour. It was in March of 2023. And when you book shows, you book them well in advance. So I was booking them months ahead. In March, I was going to have this farewell tour. I'm actually wearing the sweatshirt that I use for my tour with all the dates on the back. And I played some of my favorite venues in and around Madison and in Wisconsin, jumping around, playing my favorite places, saying goodbye to everyone that I had met right before that March. So this must have been, I think it was in December, in January and February. So I'd already had my farewell tour kind of booked. A friend of mine who lived in Kansas City found out I was going to move. And she is a chemist at the university I currently work in. So you can kind of tell where this story is going. She invited me to come apply for this position. They were looking for a chemistry faculty member. It was a tenure track position, specifically in the field that I specialize in, which is organic chemistry, which is kind of wild. And she knew I was moving and she thought it was going to be a perfect fit. And I literally told her no. We were having coffee and I told her no. I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm moving to Kansas City for music. I was so set on moving here specifically for music. I think another email later or two, she had invited me to just send your resume in. Just send your resume in. Like, it won't take you much time. I really think you'd be a great fit. And for some reason, I was inspired to all right, I'll just send my resume in. And so I did that. And then I get this call. She said, I wanted you to meet some of my colleagues. And I remember thinking that it was just a casual meet on Zoom or something, or Microsoft Teams. And we met and they started asking me questions like it was an interview. And I immediately realized that I had actually applied by sending in my resume and through this process. So I really didn't even realize I had applied for the position. I'm sitting through these questions and I wasn't fully prepared. And I'm just answering these questions freely because in my head, I was planning to move for music. So it really wasn't that big of a deal. And then I got an email saying that they want to bring me on campus for an on-site interview, and that was when I realized this was, like, the real deal, and I had just been for an interview. Gosh, I said yes. I wasn't sure if I was going to actually because I was so set on moving for music. This is the whole point of moving to Kansas City. I wanted to move to a bigger city so that way I could expand my music repertoire and meet more people and just push my skills that way. So I went for the on-site interview, and I actually really enjoyed meeting with the faculty members there and learning about how much they are there for the students. These are small classrooms, and I had been teaching at University of Wisconsin-Madison online, part-time, and I didn't really care for how large the classes were. I had classes of over, like, 300 students, so it was pretty wild. So to think that I could have a class of maybe 10 to 20 students made me think I could actually have an impact and really help these students learn my favorite chemistry. During the interview process, I gave a teaching demonstration and also I had to come up with a research project that I could do at this university, which is really tough because they don't have any of the equipment I would need as an organic chemist. And so I had to get a little creative with that, but I love creativity. So I give the interview and, they ended up offering me a job, and I was still uncertain if I was gonna take this job, but I had been really interested at that point in time. So let me share what was going on in my heart when I did this, because my brain was so set on moving to Kansas City for music. Something inside my heart said, "Just send the resume." And then I liked the conversation I had with them on the interview that I didn't think was an interview. And then I got invited on campus and I had my heart was saying, go see this. I think this is a good opportunity for you." And my logical brain was like, "You had already decided." I had already decided to move to Kansas City for music. So my I think it was my logical brain going, "We already made the decision." But my heart was saying, "Well, but this is kind of cool." I decided to go ahead and take the position. I said yes. And so when I moved to Kansas City in August, this was middle of August in 2023. So I moved to Kansas City in August of 2023. I learned very quickly that the universe had my back in a very specific way with regards to this story. When you move to a new city and decide to be full time as a musician, it's a lot of work. And I was well aware of what would happen. When you move to a new city, you have to then develop the relationships with the venues and try to get enough bookings so that way you could pay your rent, pay your bills. And that takes a lot of work. And when I moved to Kansas City, I had a lot more stability than I would have as a full time musician. I had a salary job that paid me 9 months out of the 12 months of the year. And I had an office and health insurance and a place to be. So, about a month and a half in to this new job, brand new city, my long distance boyfriend at the time, he was still living in Wisconsin, he ended his life. And losing him was the most jarring experience I had ever felt. This podcast episode is not about that story in particular, and I will be able to talk about that more, about grief in other episodes. I learned a lot through that process. Today's episode is about how the decision I made to trust that little calling in my heart, the little light that I had, the little inspiration that I felt from within to go on that Zoom call, even though I didn't know it was an interview, and to say yes to the on site interview and to say yes to this job position was not coming from my logical mind. It was almost as if I was tapped into something that said, "You're going to need this stability. You're going to need a stable job." If I had been a full time musician, and that had happened, it absolutely flipped everything upside down in my world. I don't think I would have had the energy that it would take in order to network and to get to all the venues and to make enough money to live. And so this job actually provided me a perfect amount of stability. I also had a place where I was needed. Every morning, I had to go in and teach chemistry. And it's something that you could wake me up from a nap and just shake me and ask me an organic chemistry question, and I can teach right then and there. I love this topic. And so it was something that wasn't emotionally driven like music. It was chemistry. I could go in and I could teach. And I just remember feeling so grateful that I felt needed. So it helped me keep going, even through the wide range of emotions I was feeling. Grief is heavy and wildly all-encompassing, and it's sticky and mucky and very difficult to navigate through, especially when you have no friends and no family and a brand new city and a brand new job. That was the most difficult thing I'd ever been through. And so that decision, the decision that I made to move to Kansas City and take that job for some stability was the best decision I could have made without even knowing it. I trusted that little voice inside of me, even though logically my brain was like, I told myself I was only going to move full time. I was going to move for music full time, and I didn't. Let's break this story down using the scientific method. My question was, should I move to Kansas City and be a full-time musician, or should I take this job as a chemistry professor and do some music as well on the side? And my hypothesis was that, one, that the chemistry job would provide me some stability, and my other hypothesis was that it would get in the way of my music, that I wouldn't have enough time. Another hypothesis I had was that I actually might really enjoy it and it might feed into my songwriting, which has actually become true. So I ran the experiment and I moved to Kansas City and started this new job. And the data I collected was the most interesting part. It's the unknown things in life experiments. It's the parts that you don't know are going to happen. And for me, losing my boyfriend to suicide was by far the most jarring experience that I could have never predicted. No hypothesis would have predicted that this will give me stability for when I experience a significant amount of grief. But that's the data I collected. When I had to show up to work the next day after I learned about his passing, my face was so bright red. And I remember just telling myself, well, you can either stay at home or you can go to work. You can stay at home crying or you can go ahead and teach. And so that's what I did. I didn't skip a single day of teaching. And it was the most difficult time of my life to try to get myself to keep moving. And when I analyzed the data of my decision to choose to be a chemistry professor, even though my head had decided I was going to move for music, I recognized that the reason I made that decision was based on not my head and my ego deciding I was going to be a full-time musician. I realized I had made that decision really from my heart. I had a calling within. I had a little inspiration, a little spark. And each step, I felt that inspiration. I decided to take the Zoom call. I decided to take the on-site interview. I decided to say yes to it. I felt something. I felt something. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but nothing was saying it was wrong. Everything was saying, go explore, go explore. And when I zoom out and draw the conclusion from this experiment, I realize that listening to my heart, listening to that inner quiet voice that I have, was the best decision I could have made. That job gave me stability in a time of absolute chaos. There is no there's no doubt in my mind the level of struggle I would have felt had I not taken that position. The purpose that I gained from needing to go in and teach chemistry allowed me to keep moving forward and gave me momentum forward so that I could heal through everything. If it was fully up to me to make my entire living from music, that would have been extremely difficult during that time. And so I'm really grateful that I listen to my what we call intuition. Whatever it is, that little spark inside, that little thing that says, I'm curious about that. This thing came up, this door opened, I'm curious about it. I walked through it, and I'm really, really glad that I did. I told you this episode was going to be about trust. And here I am telling you a story about how my brain, my mind, my ego said I was going to move to Kansas City for music. And yet I followed this really quiet voice that was based solely on curiosity. And that small, quiet voice is the one that I listen to. When I think about trust, the more that I recognize life experiments that have turned out in ways I could have never imagined, it comes down to listening to that inspiration voice. When you think about a decision and you've got a couple options, the one that sparks your interest the most has always been for me the best decision to make. Whenever I plan in advance and really, really plan things out and say, this is how it's going to be, I often am met with more obstacles, more resistance, more things don't go right. And instead, when every step I go, well, what feels right? What feels right? What feels right now? When I do that, it tends to be the crazier trajectory that I could have never imagined. And yet, when I look back, it was all perfect. It was all perfect. All right, it's time for your life experiment. I'm going to invite you to do two things from this episode. One, I'd like for you to reflect on times in your life where you felt inspiration and you followed it. And I want you to think about what happened. I know for me personally, anytime I followed an inspiration, it really led to some things I could have never imagined. Some really exciting things that all felt very much so in alignment. And I can also think about times in which I had felt so much resistance because I didn't follow my heart. I was following my head that had decided exactly how my life was going to be. And then it turned out to be a much more difficult path. Perhaps you felt the same thing. Consider times in your life where you've made decisions based on your heart or that inspiration you felt inside, or based on your head, your ego, your logic, the one that pushes through and already thinks it has everything figured out. You might find something there. And in a way, you might find what voice that you can trust most. Now, everyone's voice is different. My internal voice is really quiet, and the only way that I can hear it is when I get quiet. This is why I love to meditate. This is why I like to journal and slow things down. If you don't already have my journal, my I Am Lyrical Journey journal, it takes 100 days to go through. And I've just set up on my website the free 100 days of email. If you're someone like me that needs accountability and a little email in your inbox to keep you going with journaling, this is the way to do it. You can get this from my website at kelseymiles.com/100 days. That's 100DAYS. And this journal comes along with my entire album. So if you sign up for the emails, you will get the lyrical videos sent to you. Each chapter is a new song. And the reason I'm bringing this up in particular in this episode, the only way that I got through that grief of losing my boyfriend to suicide was this journey. No joke. This journey gave me the foundation that I needed, an unshakable foundation that I knew myself. I knew what I could do to keep going. I knew what habits during the day, the healthy practices I needed to do to get up, move my body, drink water, meditate, journal some. That helped me through everything. And so, because I had already done this journey a couple of times, I mean, I wrote it and I've been through it a couple times myself. It's forever growing when I go through these journeys and journal through my entire journal. Every time I learn something new and it just strengthens the foundation that I have for myself. So if you don't have a copy of this, I highly suggest getting one. It's beautiful. It's this hardback color ink, and I designed every page within here. And so you can get this with my 100 days of emails. So I have that for free on my website, kelseymiles.com/100days. Let me invite you on one more life experiment. The first one was a reflection exercise. The next one requires you to get quiet and center yourself. So the next time you have to make a decision, no matter how big or small, one thing you can do is pause and get quiet and listen. You may find that one of the decisions has just the smallest amount of more excitement, more inspiration, more curiosity around that decision than the other ones. That's the one that I want you to try and take. Acting on your inspiration was something that helped me so much in this specific life experiment, and I'm curious about what result you'll get with yours. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love if you shared it with a friend of yours, maybe someone who likes to do life experiments as well, someone you can share your results with. And also, like always, if you run one of these life experiments or something comes to mind, please email me at kelsey@kelseymiles.com. That brings us to the end of today's episode on trusting ourselves. What does it look like to trust yourself? What's that next decision you can make where you can really listen in to that internal inspiration you have, no matter how small it is? Which decision feels more inspiring? Take that one. Do that thing. Trust yourself. There's a reason that you feel more inspired to do that. And if I hadn't trusted myself, that time in my life, that September of 2023, would have been absolutely more challenging than it already was. It's really interesting to me that inspired action has such a beautiful way of lining things up to help you on your path. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Authenticity Lab. I'll be back next week with a new story and a new life experiment to continue to inspire you to live boldly, lead a life of curiosity, and keep being your most amazing, authentic self.
Yeah, that house will always call you.